Live in a constant state of fear and misery.
Things do not seem to be going too well for Zuckerberg and Facebook and their whole Libra venture. Uh, the chair of the House Financial Services Committee, Maxine Waters, is pretty much urging a specific inquiry into the Facebook launch of Libra, and is really looking back to a lot of the issues that have nothing to do with finances or cryptocurrencies that they've been involved in lately. And really, the core worry here is just their track record with handling of private or confidential information, and just how that really paints a picture of how Facebook would act if they were also this important in people's lives in a financial way. And as well, Republican Representative Patrick McHenry is also reaching across the aisle to get an inquiry into this going. So this is something that, despite really the perception of this kind of attack on Silicon Valley companies as just being completely conservative in nature, I mean, these are a Republican and one of the most extreme radicalized Democrats in Congress collaborating on the same thing, going after Facebook. So while a lot of the surface things involved in that kind of dynamic seem to be politically skewed, I mean, the calls for action in the government are anything but partisan. And then really, when you look a little even deeper into this, back in May, before any kind of public announcement about concrete details regarding Libra or actually pushing forward with this, Congress was already filing for a huge information request from Facebook on their data collection regarding how this is used in people's financial lives, specifically looking at information that Facebook sold, acquired, gathered, or distributed as far as people's private information that would be used in their financial lives. So effectively, information from Facebook being used to determine the cost of credit, or whether you are even going to be given credit by a financial institution, the cost of insurance products, whether this information might be boiled into deciding whether or not to employ somebody. And so before the issue of Libra itself even occurred to these people in government, they were already involved in a deep inquiry into Facebook's data gathering and how that affects people's financial privacy and financial life. So, like, this is not going to just be some reflexive, oh, we can't let this big tech company start this project because it's too early. This is a long coming thing, with a company like Facebook really being put under the microscope by the government. And Libra is really just the cherry on top. Like, as much as it is the exact opposite of what I want to see happen, at this point, the writing is pretty much on the walls. Like, these companies like YouTube, Google, Twitter, Facebook, they're going to have the full weight of the government smash down on them and distort the hell out of everything with regulations, whether that's breaking them up, whether that's forcing them to act a certain way towards users on their platform, whether that's just backdooring shit that doesn't really fix any of the so-called problems and is just used to exert government control. It doesn't matter. Like, this is clearly what's going to happen. And the idea that Facebook thought they could pull something like this off, given the entire dynamic facing companies like itself, is just insane. Like, it's just absolutely not going to happen.
Yeah, I think this was like whenever we were talking about the Caitlin Long tweet thread, and she was talking about how, well, maybe this will bring some of that government light on regulation and start to clear things up for cryptocurrencies in general here for the United States. And it's just like, yeah, that's a little too rosy colored vision on this. It was like, yeah, I mean, like you're saying, there's a terrible history there with people's privacy and their data and how exactly they manage that and what they do with data to manage their users and manipulate them. And it's just been a real terrible history, like you're saying, across the spectrum for these big tech companies. And I mean, you said Google in there. It's really, really hard not to bring up this whole Google whistleblower stuff and the way that there is already this sort of 2020 election meddling going on with these big tech companies against a sitting president and a lot of different people in a House and Senate. It's just it's kind of hard to look at it and not think that their internet is about to go through some big historical change here in the United States as far as the way that platforms are managed through, legal structures and how exactly their users are responsible or liable, or the platform itself. Like, these sort of things haven't been worked out, and they've definitely just sort of been running the gun on it. And I know as a Bitcoiner, it's really hard to say like, oh, well, there's some sort of place for government regulation. But I mean, it's hard to look at this and say like, what else could be done? I mean, like, I guess it all was like, they just couldn't regulate themselves, I guess. And I mean, like, if you look at Facebook just like wanting to launch a currency and, you've got all this stuff going on, it just seems like, this is a last gasp of something really bad's about to happen to all these different companies. That's the way it feels. That's the way it looks. But that's just from my perspective.
I mean, yeah. I mean, just from a purely business point of view. And then, like, there's really just another view that I don't think a lot of people really appreciate the importance of, is Zuckerberg and the Winklevi twins. Like, that they are one of the biggest Bitcoin holders publicly known out there. Like, they run their own exchange. They've been pushing this for years. And Zuckerberg and him, obviously, the whole backdrop with Facebook. But I mean, just look at something as simple on the surface as the Winklevi's exchange named Gemini and this Facebook currency named Libra. They're both zodiacs. Like, that was an intentional dig from Zuckerberg to the Winklevi twins. And really, like, when this really started going, like, most of the rumors before actual concrete details came out were that Zuckerberg was the one really pushing this, and that a lot of his, IT heads in the company were very skeptical of this being workable, governments allowing, like, all aspects of this. And so, yeah, from a company perspective, it's like they're flailing around, but also just from a personal perspective, like, this is just Zuckerberg flailing around. And it's mind boggling how out of touch, like, these company heads are when you look at what they're trying to do. I mean, even like Joe Kernan on CNBC in the wake of all the confirmation on Libra is like outright just sitting there saying like, well, this is nonsense. Like, something like Bitcoin is actually public and open and has like some, like, he pretty much says an intrinsic value, although he's clear that he's not trying to paint this image like that's an economically viable concept. It's just like there's a use in there somewhere that really gives it legitimate value. And this thing from Facebook is just a permissioned thing backed by a basket of fiat currencies. Like, how does that, like, even just a CNBC anchor is sitting there, like, seeing through the bullshit in this. And it's like, it boggles my mind when I look at this space and all these people thinking this is going to take off and people are actually going to use it. It's like, you're out of your mind. Like, you have just completely lost, like, the perspective of reality in this crypto-induced fantasy land. Like, this is not happening.
Yeah, man, I feel like that's something, just running up and down the gamut with all these companies. And for sure, yeah, Facebook is, they're right there in the middle of it. And yeah, it's crazy. I didn't even think of that Gemini Libra thing. That's that's an interesting angle I did not even think of, but for sure, I'm sure that's a dig at them. Like, golly, it is crazy. I was listening to something the other day where I think it was Joe Rogan who said, like, if you think of data as a commodity, can you think of any other commodity that has been, captured so quickly by so few companies? And like, what exactly that means? It's like our data is still this commodity that we don't even understand as the user that's creating the data. But this is like the number one commodity that people go after. Like, what other commodity is there out there where you have like a handful of companies that own all of it? And, it's really a powerful thing. And it's just too powerful. I don't understand how this situation gets resolved without somebody bringing the hammer down on them. And there's been speculation all along that this was kind of the plan, was to try and get regulated, because I guess it's something that's so far beyond their control to where they just feel like, let's just run out of control until somebody brings this thing back in. I mean, it's hard to say from being the lonely user down here that's just sort of like fighting to remain private some which way.
I mean, it ultimately just comes down to, like, you need technology to fix these types of things. Like, whatever shape the government taking action against these companies actually takes is not going to wind up good. Like, whatever it is, whatever outcome it creates, it's going to be very destructive in some way. And I really don't want to see that happen, but it's just, at this point, it's like the writing is on the wall. Like, we're watching a pissing match between giant tech companies and governments. Last time I checked, the tech company can't just show up at your house and throw you in a cage. Like, they're not going to win.
Yeah. So is there any, Janine Nopar, do y'all have any comment on this one from the Facebook Zuckerberg story?
I mean, yeah, I don't know if whatever action the government takes against Facebook or the Facebook spinoff Calibra is going to really affect. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it affects Ethereum, because Ethereum is also built around. I mean, they're not doing this whole. They're not quite at the stage of having, companies specifically being authorized to run validating nodes and all of that. But obviously, Ethereum is more likely to go in that direction than Bitcoin is. So whatever Facebook ends up facing is going to be what Ethereum should expect to do as well if they try to go more in that direction. I'm not worried about Bitcoin, but I did find it hilarious, that one thread. I don't remember the guy's name, but he tweeted about that he was encouraging people and companies like Consensus and all of that to become validators in the Libra network. And I believe that the cost of admission to become a validator, you have to have $10 million, or was it 100 million?
10 million.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like, this is just ridiculous. Like, this is not something that would compete with Bitcoin at all. And I find it funny that Ethereum people think, oh yeah, let's join this thing. Like, they're much more receptive to this because obviously, they want this to be successful so that they can always just leave their options open if they want to go in that direction. But I do find it hilarious. One of the people that was listed that he was encouraging to become part of this, to like apply to be one of these validators, he obviously listed Joseph Lubin and a bunch of people that we know are heavily involved in Ethereum, but he also listed Zuko, which I find very interesting because before this, I did not know that Zuko had a lot of Ether, but apparently he does, which is really strange. So yeah, I look forward to, this so-called privacy coin and Ethereum kind of using whatever regulatory storm is coming for Facebook, if there will be one. I can see that people in Ethereum are going to be watching it closely because, it might be something that they have to deal with. But for Bitcoin, I don't really care about it. Not interested in using it. Obviously, like, not like because apparently they're making this promise that they won't correlate your Facebook account, your personal Facebook account, with any of your activity with this token, whatever it's going to be. And I highly doubt that, because there is a huge advantage for a company like Facebook to couple, you know, what you're talking about, who you're friends with, who your family's with, who you're talking to, what you're doing. Like, they track all of this, and it would be a huge gaping hole in terms of their ability to uniquely go into that area in terms of the market of surveillance capitalism, to take advantage of that position and, use it for more financial surveillance. Like, I really don't believe that they won't do that at some point. Maybe they won't do it initially because people will obviously warn about them doing that, and maybe they'll avoid doing it at the beginning so that they can calm people's nerves. But I really, really, really don't think that they're going to keep that promise, in addition to a bunch of their other promises.
Absolutely. I mean, that's where it's like, geez, that's where it's like, this is supposed to be a service that started, basically just US customers. And, that's what they were built off of. And this is where, across the board, these guys are just violating all of these American values and, basic constitutional rights. And the ability to actually push their thumb down on American citizens is something that we have fought for a long time to maintain our rights and liberties against that sort of thing. So it's really, really crazy the way things are going right now, to imagine that they didn't, if this whole thing got exposed that they're into, like, that it wouldn't get crunched down super quickly. But yeah, the Ethereum and Libra thing, that was hysterical. And yeah, I mean, I really think those guys are just kind of they're struggling right now, just like most of these, altcoin networks. Everybody's sort of biting for a piece of the stupid money that runs into the space. Because yeah, I think I read an article just recently about how, this whole ETH 2.0 thing that was supposed to launch at the end of February of this year isn't even going to launch until next year. And there's lots of these different projects as far as like trying to figure out the scaling, where it's like, everything was all about that XDAI burner wallet for months whenever Lightning Network was being developed. And now the burner wallet guy, Austin Griffith, is leaving there and going somewhere else. And, he's talking to other networks. I mean, I don't know what's that hype about Ethereum anymore, unless they got something they can latch onto with a big name like Facebook. I swear it's like, maybe they're doing it because they see the regulatory burden is going to be on them too. But I think a part of it is also just like they need some spotlight, because they've been sort of just sitting in the dark for a while.
I mean, it's just like it's like right now, governments everywhere are trying to figure out a way to deal with Bitcoin and other things, and they don't like it. And what Facebook is doing right now is pretty much in that atmosphere, stepping out and going, look at me, I'm doing something you can stop. And it's just like, why? Why on earth would you do that? With all the other shit you have going on right now, why?
Yeah, man, that's where it's like, you got to look at the way I look at it. It's like, I don't know if they thought, like, whatever they started, this whole movement as far as like creating social networks and what that does for culture and how exactly that's moved. I think they just kind of bit off more than they can chew, and nobody really understands whenever we talk about scale and this level of scale and what that means, and like what exactly your data is being used for and how much that's worth. There's just so many unknowns that, maybe that it is like, it's just out of their control. I mean, you hear, guy like Jack Dorsey talking on podcast about how he really likes Bitcoin. He thinks that, privacy is a right and that everybody should have a right to speak and these sort of things. But you see the way that Twitter operates, it's just obvious that it's not under his control. I mean, like, he's some sort of figurehead in all this, but there's something else moving all this stuff. And that's where I think, like, these decisions, I mean, they might not even be their own. I mean, it's just like, yeah, they're running headlong into something.
Well, I mean, you can make that argument with Twitter and Dorsey, but not Facebook. Like, Facebook is specifically structured as a corporation with tiered stock structure so that Zuckerberg and the few other early people can pretty much just maintain control. Like, Twitter, to my knowledge, does not have any structure like that, and I don't think Jack actually has any kind of overriding influence in what the company does. But with Facebook and Zuckerberg, like, that's absolutely the case.
I think we are comparing Facebook coin to the wrong things. If there wouldn't be any cryptocurrencies today, then what would we do? We would compare it to PayPal. So now I ask the question, what does Libra provide that PayPal doesn't? Just name one thing.
Well, I don't really think that, like, comparing it to PayPal is that accurate either, because it's not just a payment rail. Like, if it was just a payment rail, you could use anything with it. Dollars, Bitcoin, fucking florin coin, for fuck's sake, like anything. But this is like attempting to be its own currency. Like, this will be its own.
It doesn't. It's
unit.
a stable coin.
But it's not, because the plan is a basket of currencies. Like, it's not to just take $1 and this is worth $1. It's we're going to issue these tokens and have a basket of a bunch of different nations' currencies and maybe some other things like stocks or equities. And that's what backs the currency. Like, it's not a stable coin. It's its own currency where they're going to try to specifically target a valuation. Like, it's not just a peg.
I mean,
I don't really see the difference.
To me, there's not, in terms of like the privacy costs, the censorship resistant costs and all of that, like anything that I care about, to me, there's no practical difference between, or there will be no practical difference really between Libra and what PayPal does, because at the end of the day, if numbers are moving around in a database that you don't control, it doesn't matter what that database is running or what language they're using or whatever. Probably the only big difference that I see at the moment, based on what they claim that Libra is going to do, is that they're going to be doing more smart contract type stuff, which PayPal obviously doesn't do. PayPal is generally very simple and not super complicated. So it depends on how complicated Libra is going to get with smart contracts. But at the end of the day, again, not interesting to me.
But it's like,
really,
you guys are missing the core point. It's economically, that is a universe apart. PayPal does not have its own currency that it controls the valuation of, backed by a basket of all kinds of different currencies and assets. It's not targeting a value. It's not affecting the purchasing power. It's just holding dollars for you. Like, that is a universe apart from what Facebook is trying to do, and actually creating their own economic unit that they can target and manipulate the purchasing power of.
Well, but practically the US dollar is that economic unit. That's
yeah, but that's my point, Nopara, is it's not just a PayPal. It's its own currency. That is very different, regardless of how censorship resistant it is or what technology it uses.
Yep. I mean, I don't know. I think you're right as far as it's fundamentally different, but I kind of get what he's saying as far as like, when people compare new stuff coming in and they're like, well, how's it different from this, standard thing that's been around for a long time? And then you can, on the other side of the spectrum, say, well, how's it compared to Bitcoin? So, I mean, at least, I guess at least it's coming out in this moment in time.
At least it has exchange rate, so they can charge for the conversion.
Ingen får ett sred. Jag ser i ditt slag,